You're watching Bloomberg UTV.
Hello and welcome to our special show. It's a special series. We're talking about financial inclusion across the country. We're calling this show Banking with People. We're going to kick off this debate with a senior panel of experts. We'll talk about how the efforts by the Reserve Bank of India and the government towards financial inclusion are working out. What are the opportunities? What are the challenges? Joining me now in our studio is Mr. A.K. Purwar. He is the former chairman of State Bank of India and also the chairman of India Venture Advisors. We have Mr. Arun Duggal. He is the chairman of Shriram Capital, and Abhizar Diwanji. He is the executive director at KPMG. Also, we have Ankur Lal joining us live, and he's the CEO of Infosec Software. We're going to be talking about how technology can be leveraged. But let me begin by asking Mr. Purwar about how he sees the efforts of financial inclusion. You have pioneered it in many ways when you were with the State Bank of India. Today, financial inclusion is seen as a new topic, but State Bank of India has always been doing it. What is the difference in the new policy initiatives that we've taken on financial inclusion?
Well, let us have a look at what has happened in the country as far as the financial inclusion side is concerned. Yes, State Bank of India and public sector banks are doing a great job. But the point is it sufficient? I don't think that through the existing system we have not covered more than 30% of the eligible people. The income which gets generated in that for the economy or for the society is far more larger than what income gets generated in the lendings to other sectors of the economy. Having said that, in terms of the present position, there is a huge space to be covered, and perhaps in the new banking policy or the new policy which is coming out, I personally believe that RBI must address this issue in some way by focusing on the players who can really do a meaningful work in the financial inclusion area.
Mr. Duggal, how do you see that? Because the private sector has a very critical role to play in this as well. So far, it's been really a government effort, but now the government and the RBI wants the private sector to be included in this effort.
I think, as Mr. Purwar mentioned, the government sector and the existing banking sector has done a good job in getting people included in the financial system, but much more needs to get done. As far as Shriram Group is concerned, unlike other financial institutions which also do financial inclusion or some other organizations which follow financial inclusion as a CSR, for Shriram Group this is our only business. We only do financial inclusion, and we've been doing it since 1974. So we have a large customer base, nearly 50 lakhs customers who are not served at all or served well by the formal financial system. And those are the customers we are serving, and we are providing and meeting their credit needs. Some deposit needs also, but those are the customers we hope that, as Mr. Purwar said, under the new policies and by granting new licenses, that these customers will also have an opportunity to get included in the formal financial system.
I'll bring in Abhizar here. Abhizar, just to give us a scale of what the challenge is actually when you talk about financial inclusion, could you just help us understand that in perspective?
Well, as both the gentlemen said here, financial inclusion actually is kind of a need for the hour, though we've had a pace. So just to give you a scale, we have 500 million mobile phones, of which 200 million don't even have bank accounts. So we see that though financial inclusion has been around in this country in various forms over a much longer period than the telecom.
Actually, the latest figures are 700 million of telecom connections.
And the financial inclusion bit is not moved.
True.
So really, I think the pace is slow. RBI has come out with fair amount of measures, a lot of them constructive. The new banking regulations also talk about an element of inclusion coming in. Couple of things need to be realized here. In our country, one of the reasons why financial inclusion has not worked the way it is because it is still viewed as an obligation by the banking system and not a profitable business proposition. Now, there is an ecosystem which exists today. To take an example, somebody like a State Bank of India actually cuts through that whole ecosystem and is able to do everything. But there are banks, the new private sector banks or the foreign banks, they serve a particular part of the ecosystem. They need to contribute for the other parts of the ecosystem like transport to actually go down and do the financial inclusion piece. So there is an ecosystem, and if that ecosystem is well oiled, financial inclusion will catch much faster pace.
So to enable that ecosystem, I think technology is critical, and that's where I think we should bring in Ankur. Ankur, the scale is huge, and you have been following this, and you've been actually working in this field for a while. How can technology be leveraged to reach out to the huge number of people that we are talking about?
I think the problem is immense. It's a large problem before us. It's also a problem which technology can definitely tackle. So we have 700 million people connected on the network. It's a mobile network. All these people can actually be also connected on a financial network. So we have technology available through biometrics, through identification mechanisms, through which we can actually enable the whole ecosystem. And an ecosystem can really be established. It can be a thriving ecosystem.
We're going to take this discussion forward in just a bit. We take a short break over here. But I thought the key initiatives, technology is clearly there. But let's talk about the broad parameters like microfinance, banking correspondence policy, as well as the new licenses which the RBI is talking about. How will these make an impact on the efforts on banking inclusion? We'll talk about that when we return in just a bit. You joined us for a special discussion on financial inclusion. Mr. Purwar, key issues and policies which have been initiated by the government on microfinance, on banking correspondence and new licenses. What should be the key aspect? What should be the biggest priority if we are going ahead on financial inclusion?
Well, in financial inclusion, if we see today, people, when they put financial inclusion, they only focus on that financial inclusion is required to be done only in rural areas. In my view, if you see in urban areas and metro areas, everywhere financial inclusion is warranted, where people who are living below the poverty line in different areas, their economic activities need to be supported so that they can.
So, Mr. Duggal, let's pick up the issue of new licenses, which the Reserve Bank of India is discussing, and government also wants more banks to come in. We've had in the first phase of privatization of private banks coming in, we've seen a lot of improvement in the way people have been catered to. The delivery service has changed. You have a plethora of ATM. You actually don't go to a bank anymore, to a branch anymore. What can the new licensing regime, what can the new set of banks who are coming in, what can they offer which has not been catered to so far?
I think it's going to be a question of mindset, that people who come in and establish new banks, they have to have a different business model. I'm actually very optimistic on how the financial inclusion is going to spread. I think the time has come for financial inclusion to take off.
But you know what Mr. Purwar said, that even the private banks today, even in the metros, have not been able to cater to everybody within the metro. So is that a gap?
There is a gap, and my point is that the banks today have a business model, they have a cost structure, they have a technology platform which was put in place many years or decades ago. New technology has come, as Luke mentioned, new delivery channels have come up. Now if we take, it is that what makes me very optimistic, that time has come for financial inclusion to take off, because it's going to be a profitable activity. People are going to make money by serving at the bottom of the pyramid, and that money is to be made. And apart from the social consideration, this business drive itself will do a